Hi, it's Elizabeth Straub, and I will be doing my final lab project on the stoichiometry lab. The overview of the lab activity. Our purpose in this lab is to observe the coefficients in a balanced chemical equation, which will represent mole quantities. It will not represent mass quantities. We will also be observing the conservation of matter in a chemical reaction. In the procedure, there are two parts. There's part A, where you need to polish your zinc, measure out 20 milliliters of zero point 0.1 molarity of lead into a test tube, and put the zinc in the test tube. In part B, you will be finding out the reaction of sodium carbonate and calcium chloride, and then you will answer some questions about part B. Then you go back to part A and scrape the lead from the zinc onto filter paper, making sure to not leave the lead in the test tube. Put it in the oven to dry, and then weigh the filter paper and the lead. You will record all the information in your lab report. You will put some information in the data section in your digital notebook. Make sure all the parts are filled out for your digital notebook. Also, don't forget to put pictures, at least 5. Overview of experience. I think this lab went well for me. At some points during the lab, I got confused, but it really did help to have a partner to do this particular lab. It helps to have another person's perspective when observing what happens to the materials and chemicals during part A and part B of the lab. One mistake was when I removed the zinc strip from the deionized water. Most of the lead fell off into the tube. I needed it to come out of the tube to scrape onto the filter paper. So there was that mistake because I didn't know how to. I did it as carefully as possible, but it didn't want to come off with the zinc strip. It wanted to stay in the tube. Um, what things could have helped improve my overall success on this lab activity? One thing that could have helped was to have a longer strip of zinc to make it easier to pull out of the tube, because I was trying to angle it, trying to get the tweezers in there to pull the zinc out, but it didn't want to. And also to find a way to keep the lead on the zinc strip so that it doesn't fall off into the water and stay in the tube, because I needed that, but it did not want to come out. What other resources did you use for the lab? I didn't use any other resources for the lab. I probably should have watched a video on a way to carefully remove the zinc from the water, because I just grabbed the zinc and slowly pulled it out. Maybe there was more information out there on a better way to pull the zinc out so that the lead stayed on, so that I could have weighed and measured it out correctly. So there were probably slight differences and everything. What do you think has been the most valuable asset that you are taking with you from this laboratory to your future lab courses? To definitely ask help from a peer if I'm slightly confused on a part of the lab, and to always ask the professor for help if I am like too confused or need help. The most valuable asset is to have a partner. For some of the labs, not all of them, you need a partner. And it helps to have the professor there to ask as many questions about the lab that you have. It also helps to have all the materials you need on the lab table so that you don't have to go far to find the needed materials for certain steps, because certain steps you have to be watching your materials and your chemicals to make sure it's doing the thing it's supposed to be doing. What is your opinion on the digital lab notebook? I think the digital lab notebook is very helpful. It keeps me more organized and you are less likely to lose the notebook. If the notebook was just printed out papers and it was a physical copy, I would be more likely to lose those parts and have missing parts of my lab. The digital notebook keeps everything together and it makes it easier to look back at other labs to compare to the lab you're doing now. I have never forgotten my computer for the labs, but I know I would have forgotten a notebook almost every single time. It also makes it easier to fix the lab and to share the lab with the professor. So I can go back to other labs, and if I find any mistakes, it's easier to fix than if a physical copy where you're constantly erasing and it just would look crazy and disorganized. What piece of advice would you share with an incoming lab student? Remember to ready your lab the week before the lab is to be done. So get your lab notebook readied. It helps to go over the lab before as well to see what you will be doing, seeing what materials and chemicals and what the procedure is like. Always ask help when you need it. And if you are confused, always ask before you do something. For example, if you're confused on where to dispose of something, material, chemical, ask the professor. Always ask before you do something, especially if you're like, oh, what am I doing? Where do I put this? If you come prepared for the lab, they are easier to get done, and you also might have leftover time to fill in the lab report and ask the professor questions on certain questions or math problems you're having issues with. He'll be there to help you out throughout your lab report. That is all. Thank you for listening to my final lab presentation.